Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, where we explore how language and culture impact global business. I'm Wendy Pease, your host and president of Rapport International. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Global Marketing Show. We've got a great guest coming up with lots of years of experience. And we were talking football before that. So the tidbit's going to have something to do with that. Before I get into the tidbit, I want to remind you that the podcast is brought to you by Rapport International, who provides high quality written translation and spoken interpretation in over 200 languages. And today's tidbit is about beer. See, sports and beer go together. Guess which country holds the top spot for the most beer consumed per capita. And it is not the United States, and it's not Germany. It's actually the Czech Republic. So most beer consumed per capita is in the Czech Republic. The runners-up in order are Austria, then Germany, Estonia, and Poland. The United States falls in at number 14. So happy beer drinking, everybody. Well, that'll bring me over to today's guest, who is John Saylor. And he has over 50 years of diversified international trade and logistics experience. And he's worked in over 90 countries, not only as a major exporter, importer, but also as a transportation services provider. Currently, he provides trade consulting to both domestic and foreign clients worldwide. John, welcome.
Good morning or good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Wendy.
Sure. Are you a beer drinker?
Only when I'm out of the country. And I was going to ask where Ireland would fall on your list. You know, that would be. I know the Irish like their beer, so
I would guess it's going to be above the United States if you're
yeah.
talking
So
per
so would
capita.
I. But yeah, I don't drink that much domestic beer. But actually, every time I'm out of the country, I always do because the beer just tastes so much better, and it's always the local brands.
Yes, yes, yes. I was in Iceland in the beginning of September, and they had a really good beer on tap. So I was able to. I have to drink gluten free, and beer's the only thing that I miss. But they had a fantastic, the only good gluten free beer I've ever had. So
Yeah, it's funny because one time, a number of years ago, I was in Belgrade, Serbia, which I go there a lot. And we walked into this club, and the guy said, "Oh, an American, we have Budweiser." I go, "You have to be kidding me. I am not going to drink Budweiser. That is not going to happen.
give me
So,
your local one. All
yeah.
right, so you've done business in over 90 countries. That's almost half the countries in the world, which is crazy. So where have you spent most of your time?
Oh my God. I spent a lot of time well, Serbia, I spent a lot of time in the Balkans, throughout the former Yugoslavia. I spent probably a lot of time there. But when I worked for the cigarette companies, I spent a lot of time in Belgium and in France. Both I had offices there, both in Paris and in Brussels, and a big distribution center in Antwerp. So I did spend a lot of time there. And I lived in Central America. I lived in Guatemala for 2 years, running for a company based out of Miami. I ran all their operations in Central America. That was fun because I lived 2 years under martial law, and there were people out there trying to kidnap me. So, but it was, I had my two Dobermans, and I felt kind of safe. And every day you run on adrenaline, but it was an interesting time.
Okay. I was going to say what was the hardest country to do business in, but it sounds like you took that in stride, not really
Yeah,
worried.
I mean, it was great. I was telling somebody, I have a friend of mine just from San Salvador. I mentioned it to her the other day, and I used to drive back and forth from Guatemala City to San Salvador, but I always had a military escort with me because of the guerrillas. So no, there are places I've been into. I've dropped down into Kuwait 2 weeks after liberation. I was an advisor to the Kuwaiti government in exile here in Washington, and also, I think I might have mentioned to you, I was in Yugoslavia in 1999, right after the bombings. I went in there to do an assessment of the damage that was done, and I was brought in by President Milosevic. And went in. I had to get permission from the State Department, actually from Madeleine Albright, which I did, to go in and do an assessment because we had done a lot of work and with Yugoslavia in the past, and now with this breaking off diplomatic relations and the full scale sanctions. So yeah, I spend a lot of time in a lot of hot spots around the world. It's kind of what I do, and you kind of people who've done it, you kind of thrive on it. The boring places for me in the world are like Paris, London. It's just there's nothing going on. So
So, how
anyway,
did you get your start?
actually, it happened when I was in the Marine Corps during Vietnam. Um, I had volunteered, and I got into the Vietnamese language school. The Marines wanted their own translators because at the start of the war, our interpreters were turned out to be Viet Cong, and a lot of Marines were getting killed. So the
Mm.
Marines decided we're going to have a school, and we're going to train people. We want our own interpreter. So I went. I spent 3 months in an immersion course. I went from 8 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, and all we spoke was Vietnamese for 3 months. And as I was I graduated. I was supposed to join the First Marine Division at Da Nang, and my orders were canceled. Told me to go to headquarters Marine Corps, and I've been accepted to State Department school. So I became an embassy Marine, and the irony of it is, out of the 13 openings in the embassy in Saigon, I was the first Marine to come through there that could speak Vietnamese fluently. They sent me to Managua, Nicaragua. So, so
Doesn't make
I actually
sense.
went through when the Sandinistas first tried to overthrow the country. So I was going through a Banana Republic war down there, and the guys who were at the embassy in Saigon were just having a good time and partying. So, but anyway, my point being is, while I was there, I met a lot of American expats, businessmen who were there that would come to the embassy all the time, and they were explaining to me what they did and their international work, and they traveled all over the world, and they were doing business there in other countries, and I was just totally fascinated by that. And so that was my objective. From that point on, I knew that as soon as I got out of the Marines, I wanted to do something in international. That's all I want to do. I want to travel the world, meet with people around the world, do business around the world. And that's what I did. And it all started from that one assignment when I was 19 years old.
And so you get out of the Marines, and what was your first international business?
I worked for a freight forwarder, customs broker in Miami, and learn the ins and outs of I always tell people that they underestimate their freight forward. Those who are in international trade, but your freight forwarders and custom brokers, they really know it. They know the ins and outs and what's required. I eventually had my own freight forwarding and brokerage firm, but at that time, this was in 19, I'm dating myself, well, 50 years. So this is 1968 and 69. I did that. And lo and behold, they sent me back to, in 1970, I went to live in Guatemala City to run their operations throughout Central America because they had offices in every one of the Central American countries. So I based myself in Guatemala City and traveled throughout the region. And but that's what I did. And I was working at that time, was working on selling our services, but also handling the exports from the United States that were coming into each one of these countries because we had brokerage firms there. So local transportation, customs clearance, the trade issues that were going on. I worked on all that at a young age. And
Okay, so take me back to, you said something interesting about your freight forwarders and your custom brokers. You said they know it all. So talk to me about how you'd work with a customs
well,
broker or freight
any
forwarder to get that knowledge.
anybody that's going to be involved in trade, other than if you're working for a company, you want to start doing your business is going, you're going to ship something out of the country, you need a freight forwarder because they'll know the regulations in the country they're going to. They'll understand what you're doing. They'll look at the product you have. They'll be able to tell you, like a lot of exporters who are new to exporting have no idea about whether or not their product needs an export license. you know, and they won't know. Now the forwarder, the forwarder will advise them. I think you need to check with the Commerce Department that you need an export license, a BIS license, or your product has military applications. You're going to need a State Department license. So for the ITAR applications. Now, the forwarder is not responsible for that. It's up to the exporter to get all that information, but the forwarder can guide them and tell them what they have to do and how to do it. Plus the fact that the forwarder can work with their clients, the exporters' clients in the foreign country they're selling to, whoever their client is, by working through their local agent to help them and guide their shipments through to those foreign countries. On the other end, it comes back the other way. So you have clients who, customers overseas, they want to sell product in the United States. So how are they going to do that and bring it in? So first things you do is having working with a customs broker that will be able to guide them to define what their duty rates are going to be. I have a little funny story, but and back in the 90s during the Clinton administration, I worked on the African Growth and Opportunities Act, AGOA, which comes up for renegotiations, which is a very great thing for West African countries. I worked on it when I was on the Corporate Council of Africa. I testified in front of Congress about it, and we got it enacted. Once it was enacted, Commerce Department put on a one-day program at their headquarters where they invited the ambassadors to the West African countries and their commercial attachés. And I went in there to do a presentation on shipping their products, bringing their products in from Africa to the United States and making a comment. If you think customs in your country is bad, you have never dealt with U.S. customs. So, and you can imagine the graft and the corruption that goes on in these African countries. And you're telling them, our customs is worse than your customs, even though there's no graft and corruption. You better prepare yourself. So that's what we did. And that was sort of the guidance that we did for everybody.
So yeah, that knowledge and all that list of things that your freight forwarder can help you with. Somebody said to me the other day, not all translation companies are created equal. And so I would imagine that's the same for a freight forwarder. How would you go about picking a freight forwarder that you know you could trust?
Well, you got to have a meeting with them. I mean, there's so many that are out there. You got big forwarders and you got little forwarders. You got mid-sized forwarders. You know. Now, I've always approached it to find a mid-size or smaller forwarder if you're a new company because you get more of a personalized treatment as you would from a big gigantic forwarder. A big gigantic forwarder, of course, has all the wherewithal to be able to handle anything. You hear about these things. We'll use DHL or FedEx. Well, they're always good for express packages, but some things they're not good at. So you go for a forwarder. Specifically, you want to find a forwarder that's knowledgeable in the country that you're exporting to. Not all forwarders are good for, there's some that are really good into Europe that don't know anything about the Middle East and vice versa. So you have to do your homework, and a lot of, as you know, we talked about, I sit on the district export councils, and have been since the 90s, and we have always, people who are new to export, we working through the Commerce Department and the state agencies that make reference to, we will help small and new to export companies to advise them how to go about doing that. And we can identify freight forwarders or customs brokers for them, whether it's big or small, depending on what their needs are.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, why don't you say a little bit more about the what you've seen in the decks? Like, what is the deck? What's the purpose for it, and why are they helping people find freight forwarders at no cost?
Well, the district export councils, there are 60 some odd district export councils in the United States. From every state has one. And some have a little more, like California is so big, you have several decks that are out there. I think there's 66 decks. And Texas has several, and so does Florida. Here in the state of Virginia, we just have one. But we also handle the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. comes under our control. Every deck member, we're limited to only 36 members on the District Export Council, and we're appointed by the Secretary of Commerce. So there's a whole approval process that we have to go through to be appointed to the decks. The decks serve as an advisory capacity to the Secretary of Commerce and the Commerce Department, basically on the commercial service on advising and helping them on promoting and serving for U.S. exports out of the United States. Now, we also work on the import side, but the main emphasis is on the exports. So, working with the Commerce Department, which has offices throughout the United States, and of course, thinking of the commercial attaches that we have in the embassies and consulates. By the way, we do not have commercial attaches at every embassy and consulate in the world. They are, uh, in some countries, they'll take on more than one country, depending on, like in Africa, they may have several countries that attache may represent. But the Commerce Department here has, in each state and each area is a district that we help them and work with companies, exporters. Now we're all exporters, and we have manufacturers, we have service providers, a lot of attorneys, got bankers, insurance people. Everybody's involved in the international. We talk, we meet, but there are things that come up that we will provide service as the Commerce Department asks to work with private companies, some companies who are new to export, to help them, to guide them. And we don't charge for that. It's a free service. Eventually, they're going to want to dig down in the weeds, and then we will recommend somebody that could basically help them for whatever their need may be, i.e., again, a freight forwarder or a custom broker, a banker, an insurance company, a trucker, and it all depends on what they want. So basically, we are there. We've been around since the Nixon administration when they first started this. We've been going through subsequents every time there's a change in a secretary, and now there's been a big change now with the Trump administration. So we're all now with the secretary learning who the decks are, and we as the deck getting comfortable with who the secretary is and the undersecretaries in ITA, International Trade Administration, which is what the commercial service comes under. So, but we also work with the other sections of commerce, mainly BIS. And that's also on the licensing and making sure that we have what we need. So that's basically what we do.
And why is it for free?
Because the decks are out there to help. We're not out there to make money. I mean, we'll put on seminars and webinars. We do that, you know, all the time across the country. And there's a fees for that, and they'll charge depending. Could be a half-day seminar, it could be a 3-day seminar, on depending on whatever the subject matter is. But when the Commerce Department calls and says, we have a client, that somebody's reached out to us that needs some help, could you talk to them? Absolutely. And they know when we come in, we're just going to give them some guidance of where to go. And if they want to go deeper, we can recommend somebody. Like I said, I'll go back to the freight forwarders. You'll need a freight forwarder, and this is who we'll give you several. We're not going to be one at Pacific. We're not going to say, oh yeah, use this one only. No, we'll give you several. You pick. Here's their phone numbers. Here's the contacts. Let them know that that we you were recommended by the district export. You can use my name, and but at that point in time, we'll take them as far as they can go before they realize, hey, you need a lawyer. You need somebody who's going to be able to help you to work on. You're going to need an export license on the product you have. We know you don't know how to do it. I'll recommend companies to you that will do that. There's a fee for what they'll charge you to guide you through in order for you to get an export license.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever you do not export without that license, because you're going to get penalized and you could lose the ability to export.
Yeah.
And you could get fined and you could get jail time if it's really something bad. Depending who you sell to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I sit on the District Export Council in Massachusetts, and it's just amazing the number of people that I've met throughout the nation that in Massachusetts and throughout the nation that just want to help exporters. I mean, it's a small community.
It is a small community. It's a difficult time right now, going out with everything that's going on. And of course, there's, like I always tell, as what you and I spoke before, I look at, trade, people have to remember trade is a two-way street. It's not just what we're exporting. So a lot of us exporting, we're also importing. So you have to remember that side of it as well. So our business partners overseas, everybody has to get something out of it. And your partners have to be happy. They're going to be satisfied with what you're doing when you do get in a trade agreement.
So there's been a lot of volatility in tariffs now, which has affected trade, and I've heard all sorts of stories. What are you seeing on the people you're advising and talking to?
Uh,
How are they
there's
handling it?
there's
Practical,
not a
yeah.
lot of happy. We went from the average tariff of before Trump came into office. It was 2.5% across the board for everybody. And then, they slapped all these huge tariffs on it. Man, right now I think it's like 18 or 19%. And some countries, oh, this is a good deal. I said, well, it's not really a good deal. And, last, December 19th, 2025, your tariff rate was 2.5%, and now it's 19%. Not really a good deal for you if you look at it that way. Uh, there are some U.S. manufacturers that are happy about it because they're trying to protect our industries. But the majority of people I speak to are not happy about it because, one, you're imposing tariffs on people. They don't like the tone from the United States of being dictated to. And as I told you, I've had 3 trips in this past year. I was spent in January and February. I spent 2 weeks in Thailand talking to people over there. They were not happy about where the United States was going on their trade aspects. I was in Lima, Peru in the end of June at the Association of American Ports Authority, their annual Latin American conference. There was about 1,000 people there. Everybody I talked to from Latin America, they're getting slammed on the tariffs. They're not happy what's going on. And then I just recently returned, just 2 weeks ago, from Serbia and Switzerland, and they don't understand. Why are they being penalized? I mean, a little country like Serbia, for example, has got a 35% tariff rate. And the United States is like their 25th trading largest trading partner. So what I'm hearing, and even within our decks and everything that we're working on, it makes it very hard for us to try to sell our products overseas when we're penalizing the countries we've been trading with to bring their products back in here. They're looking for alternatives. Let me put it that way. I see this now. This is coming out more and more that even with the like the Europeans and everybody else, they're going to other places. You know, China. There was a thing this week that the Chinese, we thought that by imposing all these high tariffs on China, and thinking that the Chinese really need the American consumer. Well, China said, no, we don't really need to. We like to have it, but we're going to concentrate on what we're doing everywhere else in the world, and their exports have grown, so they haven't declined.
Wow. Yeah. So somebody in international trade pushed back on me and said, and I'm, open to hearing all views. He said that the US had a 2.5% tariff. Our tariffs were so low. That's why we imported so much into the United States. But the large percentage of the, shipping containers are going out empty from the United States because of trade. And so that means a lot of countries are selling into us. But if we try to sell into other countries, they have higher tariffs. And so he didn't think it was bad that we try to equalize it. And then somebody else said to me, they've been hearing, a lot of talk. Well, the tariffs should be equal between the countries. Can you comment on that? Those two
Well,
conversations I had.
I think that there's a lot of, you know, besides the tariff rates, other tariff barriers that are out there that makes it really difficult to trade. And I can understand that you want to have it equal, that you can sell and you be treated fairly. I mean, I agree with that 100%. I also think that there's other issues. I think I mentioned to you, I do a lot of lobbying work on Capitol Hill on trade issues. I've been doing this since the 90s, going back to the Clinton administration. But I remember that we were working on one piece of legislation during the Obama administration, and I had a meeting with several chairmen of committees on trade. And I asked this one, said, well, and this congressman, this chairman was from Pennsylvania. He says, well, my constituents, they don't like trade. We're totally against the trade issues. I go, really? Why? He says, well, they just don't think it's right. We should be buying American. I go, well, let me ask you a question. Do you have a Walmart in your district? And the guy said, oh yeah, of course I have a Walmart. I said, well, why do your constituents, they like Walmart? Why? He said, well, because the prices are low. And I said, you realize that 85% of the items sold in Walmart are imported. And like 67% of that comes from China. And he had this like blank face looking at me, and I going, I said, obviously you haven't been in a Walmart in a long time, and you haven't walked in there to pick up a package and flip it over to see where it came from. I said, so, on one hand, your constituents, they like the low prices. On the other hand, they don't like to trade. I said, you can't have it. There's got to be a mix there. And I said, the last time I remembered, we don't grow bananas in the United States, It's another thing they looked at. I said, there are obvious things that we have to import. And the other thing that I brought up with people, if you want to blame American companies who, let's talk Nike, for example, or Microsoft, many of these companies, why did they go overseas to manufacture? Okay, one, labor costs, material costs, it's a lot cheaper for them. But why did they do it? Well, their stockholders want a return on their investment. And they want to make sure these companies are making money. So the companies say, we're going to make money, but we'll have to go overseas to do it. Okay, great. Well, now the stockholders are happy, But you see this goes back and forth. So who do you blame? There's a lot of blame to go around. So but I always think that at the end of the day, you can work with your trading partners to come up with some type of compromise. I use Vietnam as a prime example. We have an office in Hanoi, and Trump slapped him with 47% tariff. So the prime minister and their trade minister, they came to Washington, negotiated. They went back and they agreed that they would allow all U.S. imports into Vietnam to be duty-free. Administration dropped their tariff rate down to 19%. But there's a big but here like that. I told the Vietnamese, you can drop them down to zero, don't do anything. You need to buy more. That's the whole issue. You need to buy more products from the United States to see, because you have your trade surplus with the United States is over $100 billion. It's huge. You are the 9th largest trading partner with the United States, and that's why you're getting hit. You need to buy more. You need to lower that difference. So they're looking, but at the same time, now they get slapped with the cost of what they just put onto it on furniture. So right after they had meetings, it was a month ago, where the U.S. trade reps was in Malaysia promising all their Asian partners there's not going to be any more increases, and the next day the administration slapped a 25, I think it was a 25% tariff on all imported furniture and other items. Well, Vietnam is they're like the number 2, almost number 1 supplier of furniture to the United States, which is sad, because when I had my brokerage business, we represented in North Carolina all the furniture manufacturers, but all of them shifted their production overseas.
Right. I didn't realize Vietnam was such a big furniture provider. Yeah.
Furniture, shoes, like everybody. The stuff that's coming out. So when you look at this and you talk about the tariff rates, and then people buying, if you're buying Nike shoes or your iPhones, the iPhones are assembled in Vietnam. You have to look at the products that are coming out of there, how that's being hit and coming back to the American consumer. So it's a vicious circle. Everybody like to have free trade. That's great, but you want to be treated fairly at the same time, because these invisible barriers that are out there can make it very difficult.
So, say you were czar of tariffs for the world. How would you?
You mean I'd be the president of the United States?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Okay, I got it.
Suits you.
It's the same title.
Yeah. So how would you adjust how would you handle tariffs and tariff guidance? How would you fix it?
I'll use Brazil as a good example. Okay, so we have this huge trade surplus with Brazil, and so President Trump, in his infinite wisdom, because he didn't like the political situation in Brazil, because Bolsonaro was, put on trial for trying to overthrow the country and everything else. They didn't like it, so they slapped a 50% tariff on all things in Brazil. Now, Brazil is our largest supplier of coffee to the U.S. I don't know what the price of coffee is going for in Boston right now, but I was telling my significant other the other day, do you realize today that if you go into a bakery, and you like buy a Danish, which used to be very expensive, the coffee, you want Danish in a coffee, the coffee costs more than the Danish. So
Yeah,
I mean, that's, you're going here in Washington, the average cup of coffee is $4.25.
yeah,
In Honolulu, which is the only state that actually produces coffee, the Kona coffee, it's $6.75 for a cup of coffee. So you're penalizing them. My point, going back to your original question, being the czar doing that, you go to these countries, you don't insult them, you don't threaten them. You have a conversation with them and how we can work this out together. And you tell them, like this, but because right now the first thing out of the box is we're going to threaten you. You saw when Trump did his Independence Day thing from, the White House lawn and had all these charts up there. Nobody was right away slapping everybody. That's what it is. Then now you have to deal with it. Now come back and talk to us. That's not how you do that. That's not the way you go about that. You need to have a conversation with your trading partners. You have to talk to them. These are the barriers that we're seeing. These are the things we'd like to bring down. How can we do this and work together so that it's a win-win situation for both of us? Right now, it is not a win-win situation for both of us. Most of our trading partners are getting hit. They are not happy about this, but they have to do it because they want to trade with the United States. You know,
mhm,
Unfortunately, I mean, it's great that you do that, but you have to look at the unintentional consequences of what may happen out of this. So we can look at steel. You can look at some of these big commodities that are slapping these tariffs on. How's that affecting us? How many jobs are you saving? But at the same time, how many jobs are you losing? You know.
yeah.
So they don't look at it that way. And it's not just the Trump. That happened during the Bush administration on steel.
It really is a country by country negotiation and looking what the trade is between the two countries. And I'm sure currency would have something to do with it and population. And, it's not just money volume of
No, there's
dollars.
a lot of things that are in there allowing American companies to do. You got your direct foreign investments coming in. We want to bring, it's like I said when I was in Serbia. So I asked the question, what did you guys do to deserve 35% tariff? You don't have anything. I mean, Trump, and his son-in-law, they're in Belgrade trying to build a hotel. And they're pushing back against the hotel. Is that having to do with it? Well, it has a lot to do that the Chinese are there. Chinese are in Serbia big time. They're making the investments. Other countries are coming there and doing investment. The American companies are kind of, well, we've been there. And I've been working in that part of the world in Serbia since the 70s. And I've seen it. At one time, the U.S. was one of the largest investors there. We don't do that anymore. So some of these countries, you have to look at what's holding us back from going in. What are the attractions? What can we do? There's a lot you can discuss and places to go to. But right now, the alienation that we're pushing on these countries, it's just opened the door for the Chinese to come in and offering everything. Do you know that the Chinese just recently, I say within the last month, have allowed the African countries duty-free products coming in from Africa into China.
Wow.
You know, and I'm an African expert specialist. We have an office in Accra, Ghana. I've been to Africa a lot. I was on a trade mission to Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire last year. looking at this, the opportunities that Africa is a great opportunity to go there. American companies are starting to do that, but how are we treating the Africans? We have, as I said, the African Growth and Opportunities Act is due to expire this year, and will Congress extend it, which is a benefit to the African countries. But are we there? No. You go around any African countries, Chinese are everywhere. You know, so we kind of open up the door, and at the same time, the administration is trying to these cutbacks in we're out trying, like I was in both in Bangkok and in Lima and in Belgrade and being in Switzerland, uh, talking about the commercial service. Are you guys okay? Are you going to have your jobs? What about your staff? Because the administration is cutting back everywhere. While we're cutting back on these offices, and both not just internationally but domestically, why are we doing that when we should be, adding people to it to help to increase our trade? Meanwhile, we're cutting back and the Chinese keep adding, you know. So it's just, we're up against a wall in these things with something that we're creating, not our foreign competitors.
So most of the exporters in the United States are small and mid-sized exporters. What would you tell them right now, or people that are thinking about doing global business? How do you succeed in this environment?
Well, the first thing, and I mean, depending on what the product is, they identify the area they want to go into countries, and I would recommend that wherever anybody, I mean, go cold calling. Cold calling is difficult, but what you can do is I would always concentrate somebody. You have a contact or a relationship in some country and around the world that you think your product, start with that. Start with a personal relationships. Just don't go and show. I mean, you can always go. The Commerce Department has this program called the Gold Key Program that they can help analyze and do groundwork on assisting American companies. I highly recommend that. If somebody's interested in a particular country, reach out to the commercial service here in the United States, in the commercial service office here in their locale, and then tell them what they want to do and tell them they're interested in a Gold Key program. Tell them what their objective is, and then the commercial service office here will put them in direct contact with our commercial office in that particular country or that particular region. As I said, not every country has a commercial office, but they'll put them in contact with them and start the process of going through and identifying, giving them background information, identifying the markets, identifying potential partners. And you may have somebody, I'm suggesting, well, they'll be able to go, there's a fee they'll charge, and they should charge a fee. And I'm going to say this right now because they're now thinking about doubling or tripling that fee. And we're trying to fight against that because that will make it very difficult for small and medium-sized exporters to take advantage of it. If you're going from $700, to pay for this program, and now they want to charge $3,000, that's a hefty jump. And it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of work that our commercial attaché, the commercial service offices oversee, that they have to do, but they want to do it because it's all about promoting U.S. exports. You know, so in both in goods and services. Don't remember on service sectors. We have a huge trade surplus with the rest of the world when it comes to services. So, but anything that anybody wants to do, that would be my first step in contact. You know, and the irony of it is, a commercial service officer, well, we need to put you in touch with somebody from the deck, and they might be able to help you some of their experience. And that's the other thing, because of the members we have on the commercial service knows people in the deck that have experienced exactly what this exporter is going through and in a particular market, and they'll connect the two, and that's how it's done.
Okay. So the first is identify the country. The next is identify the contacts that can help you. So you're still saying, even with all this tariff stuff and the pulling back and the questions going on, still export. Like, don't pull back.
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
not saying give up on it. No, I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity because I think there's going to be changes. It's going to take time, and I'm going to, it's 20, it's October 2025. You know, the next presidential election is in 28, and in January 20th of 29, everything we're going through right now could be totally wiped out, just like it did last time, and we start all over again. You know, so but that's how it's always been. I mean, you just got to go with the ebb and flow. But do your homework, position yourself, be prepared, and go with it. You know, but I wouldn't stop anybody from trying to export. You know, there's always people out there. I mean, the American brand still is the American brand. Okay, people want to see that, but uh, the Chinese are rising fast. When I was in Belgrade, I had the ability to climb into a BYD, you know, one of their electric cars, and I just, oh my God, that because you're not going to get them here. And are you kidding me? I saw my first one when I was in Bangkok. I saw them all over the place in Thailand, uh, but in Serbia, I finally got to climb into one. Talk about being impressed, and then you look at the pricing on that. And if you don't think the Chinese could make a quality car, you're kidding yourself.
For
Uh,
a great price.
yeah, for a great
I
price. I
mean,
mean,
we
they
have
can
all
sell them
these
for
Verizon.
$9,000.
Yeah,
They're trying to, they want to bring them into Mexico, and the Mexicans have slapped a 25% tariff on the car electric vehicles coming in. I always recall, and I tell people, for those of us who are old enough to remember, the big scare before China was Japan. So you go back to the 70s and 80s, we were like scared to death of what the Japanese are doing. They're going to come in, they're going to take over, and look at their crazy cars. Who wants to buy a Toyota, a Nissan? These are the worst cars in the world. I love my Lexus. Okay. So the point being, the Japanese got better and better. And now everybody knows, you want something quality, you don't hesitate, buy something from Japan. It's the same thing going on with China. They're getting better and better and better every single day, you know. And we as America in the United States, we need to be aware of this. We need to keep improving, and we got to make it easy. We got to make it comfortable for our trading partners that they want to buy from us and they like our products, and it
right.
needs to be affordable.
Yes, yes. Yeah, well, this has been such a fabulous conversation. You've got a wealth of experience, and we could keep going, and the depth of understanding that you have. So, what kind of services do you provide now for people? So why would somebody reach out to you, and how can they reach you?
Well, I actually have a new customer coming in right now that wants to open a business here in the United States. That's the other thing. I was at our embassy, and we had Serbian businesses there. I took some with me to meet with a commercial attaché. I said, "What can we do?" I said, "The number one thing, you guys need to go and do an investment in the United States. Open up a business, hire some American workers." So this is on the foreign side, of advising companies who want to enter the United States, trying to guide them, pretending whatever market they have or whatever their product is, or even their service. I've seen transportation companies want to do the same thing. On the export side, it goes back to identifying, walking somebody through it, guiding them. What countries do you want to go to? I don't know everything. It's the old question. It's not what I know, it's who I know. And you say that about anybody. It's like being here in Washington, to put you in the right contact to make the introduction to somebody else that will be able to help you and guide you to be able to expand on your markets. Because I've had a lot of people that are well known, they're doing stuff, they've been exporting a lot of time, and then all of a sudden they got an issue. I talked to them about just their insurance on moving their product overseas. What do you have? We don't have it. This is what you need to have. And we'll walk you through this. This is, if you're going to do a show, you should go through, there's a whole bunch of programs that you could do that are available to you. These are the type of things that I would help companies do. And then I have my whole product line that we do is on the export of security equipment, all non-lethal, that what we do. So anything like night vision goggles, which all requires licenses, to cameras, to all kinds of interesting types of equipment that foreign governments that need. So
Okay. And how can people reach you?
you can get through my email address, which is I guess you're going to post it. It's jasailor1 at verizon.net. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay, so that's J as in John,
Right.
A.
A
Saylor, Saylor, and then the number one.
at verizon.net.
Okay, okay, that's great. And then before we go, I always ask everybody what's their favorite foreign word. You knew this was coming.
You told me this beforehand,
I
and
didn't know.
I told you I have it. It's really easy. It's actually not one word. There's three words, okay, that go together.
Okay,
And I was laughing about it, especially since I got back from this trip, because I've been to 143 countries, not only doing business in 90, I've traveled around the world, 143 countries. And these three words are said. I don't care if I'm in Mongolia, I'm in Azerbaijan, I'm in Vietnam, Ukraine, you know, I don't care where I am, okay? They always come up. So, Wendy, you're with a bunch of friends and you're at a restaurant or a bar or a club. Everybody says, "Oh, let's take pictures." Okay, let's take pictures. They got the waiter comes, "Hey, would you take a picture?" The waiter or anybody waiting, they are even people on the street, they cannot speak a word of English. They don't speak a word of English. They don't understand English except they show them the camera. They know exactly what to do. What do? They hold the camera up like this and they go, 1, 2, 3.
Yes,
It's, am I right? It's consistent.
absolutely.
They don't. I'm like in Lima. You think people down there, the guys in everybody in Latin America, you think they're going to go uno, dos, tres? No, it's one,
One,
two,
two,
three.
three. I have heard that in China, yeah.
Everybody, and I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're in the middle of nowhere, you know. A number of years ago, when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, okay, I was in Tanzania and I
Yeah,
climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So we're up at our high camp. We're at 15,000 feet. It's snowing. And I'm talking to my Tanzanian porters. It's just me and the 10 of them. And we're going to take cameras out. We're going to take cameras out, take pictures of each other. They understood English, but anyway, they're going to do this in Swahili, but they take the camera. They go, "John, okay, 1, 2, 3," like that. I'm on top of Mount Kilimanjaro. That's what happens.
it is. It is. Oh, that's just so funny. That's one of those quirky little behaviors that you start noticing. Now everybody will see it forevermore, wherever, whatever country they're in.
Yeah.
I think you get the gold star for most countries visited of anybody I've ever talked to.
Yeah, it happens when you, as I tell people, this is what happens when you get old. But I've never refused a country I couldn't go to. When, like I said, people say you go into war zones. I mean, when they dropped me into Kuwait, when I dropped into Kuwait, literally, I mean, Schwarzkopf had just, been there 2 weeks. They just liberated. Everything was still on fire when I came in there, and going
Yeah,
through that with the military escorts, and same thing when I was in Belgrade right after the bombings. There were people there that wanted to kill me because I was an American.
yeah.
But you kind of, it's you've been doing it all your life, and maybe someday somebody punches your number. I don't know, but I just like to travel, and I like people from all walks of life, and I like to learn all about each country and their way of life and how they do things. And they're all, and everybody, and I know you travel and a lot of people do that. When you show an interest in their country and what they do and like that, they like that. You don't want to come in as, "I'm an American." No, you come in like this and tell me about your how things are going, your customs. I want to know all about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we may have to do another episode on this. But John, thank you so much for sharing all this
Oh, my pleasure, Wendy.
fascinating information.
Anytime. We should
Yeah,
have a conversation on the foods you eat around the world.
yeah.
You could do that one on your own like that. You
The
know where I'm going
crazier
with
the
that.
better.
Yeah.
Bring it on. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And I know I've got a couple of friends already that I'm going to send this off to because of all the global trade and tariff discussion that we have here and how we'd go about solving something like this. So I thought it was very insightful. So think of who is struggling with tariffs or has a strong opinion on this that might need to hear another side and forward it on to them. All right, so I am going to say goodbye in 1, 2, 3.
Bye, Wendy. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Global Marketing Show. We started this podcast to capture the stories of people who do global marketing and work for companies that export, since those companies have higher revenues, higher profits, higher valuations, higher salaries, and more stability, according to the U.S. Department of Commerce. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And if you know somebody who would be a good guest, introduce them to me, your host, Wendy Mackenzie Pease. If you'd like to learn more about global marketing or language translation and interpretation, visit Rapport International's Resource Center at www.rapport translations.com. Au revoir. Hasta luego. Ciao for now.